Hi, this is your host Swapnil Bhartiya and welcome to another episode of Mainframe Matters. And today we are here at Open Mainframe Summit in Philadelphia and we have two guests from Micro Focus, Misty Decker, Director of Worldwide Product Marketing at Micro Focus, and once again, Derek Britton, Director of Communications and Brand Strategy at Micro Focus. Derek, first of all, it's great to see you again, and Misty, it's great to host you for the first time.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, and there are a lot of exciting news also that we are going to talk about. Announcement of some, new working groups as well. So, but let's start, one by one. Misty, you tell us a bit about, what do you do, at Micro Focus and also in context of Open Mainframe.
Oh, that's great. I have more than 30 years of experience in mainframe technologies, and I joined Micro Focus about a year and a half ago to do product marketing for our mainframe products. So my job is to explain this stuff in a way that people can understand. And I've always been an active advocate for mainframe technologies. And I've always been a member of the Open Mainframe project. And now that I'm in Micro Focus and in this position, it's just even more compelling reason to engage and bring new ideas to the group.
Well, I've been in the Open Mainframe project myself since around 2020, when I was one of the small band of activists that said, enough is enough, we need to do something about the misinformation about the COBOL language, which I'll come on to later on. But the COBOL Working Group was formed by myself and a few others, Swapnil, to effectively address some of the challenges that we saw in the marketplace about what people understood COBOL to be. I've been at Micro Focus a very long time, and I started as a COBOL programmer. So if you cut me in half, it says COBOL through the middle. So it's dear to my heart. So it's something that we were able to use the Open Mainframe project as a platform for, to do some truth telling about the language.
Right. Let's just talk about COBOL for a second. We have had this discussion about the working group also, and COBOL research also in past. Talk a bit about also COBOL became recently a topic of discussion as well. So talk about what kind of, have you seen any growth in adoption of COBOL recently?
Well, it's a great question to imagine. So why has it suddenly become such a topical conversation? And the honest truth. And what you might not read is it never really went away. COBOL actually has grown steadily, almost inexorably, since its foundation in the early 60s. It became very much central to what industry was using as a piece of IT technology to solve the business challenges of the day. And it remains to this day a very, very useful tool to do what it does best, which is supporting large commercial IT processing systems. That's been going on for decades. That hasn't really gone away. And in fact, our research from a couple of years ago suggests that the amount of COBOL out there has actually grown over that time. But because it works, it's not newsworthy, it's not topical. So it sort of quietly goes about its business of supporting the world's economy without any sort of fanfare, without any discussion. And almost to a certain extent, it's victim of its own quiet success. And so recently, and this happened over 20 years ago with the Y2K problem, where there was, the sky is falling, we've got a big problem coming up because COBOL can't survive the Y2K. It turned out that a simple fix, it did survive Y2K almost without issue. More recently, in 2019, I think it was, someone famously blamed COBOL, or they couldn't even pronounce COBOL correctly, but they blamed COBOL for the ailments of a particular IT processing system here in the States. It was fake news. Actually, it wasn't true. But since that time, there's been a big discussion about, well, is COBOL still right in this day and age, 6 decades later? And the answer is yes. So as far as I'm concerned, what needed to be told at the time was the truth about COBOL, the objective truth. And that's why myself and a few others, and Misty was soon into the conversation as well, we got together and we formed the COBOL Working Group that the Open Mainframe project very kindly helped set up and supported us in that. And since then, we've been trying to provide objective, quantifiable, fact-based evidence about the value of COBOL. And we've been having some fun along the way, but there's an illuminating amount of statistics that we now have available that shows just how valuable it is.
Right. When you're talking about, the popularity of COBOL in reality versus perception in media and news, sometimes you don't want to be in news all the time, because then also, once again, this shiny thing, so you get attention for all the wrong reasons. Sometimes boring is good, as long as industry, understands that. So, but once again, the challenge happens, hey, if it's not in the news cycle all the time, then you might not attract new developers and a lot of folks. So when we look at Open Mainframe project, a lot of initiatives, or the Zoe project is also there, to attract new developers, because the expertise that is there in mainframe, the folks, they are kind of planning to retire, the workforce, kind of. So what initiatives are there? You talk about the working group, but beyond that, to kind of make COBOL more visible, or to attract new developers towards that. Misty, do you have anything to share there?
There's many activities. Should we focus in on just what's happening in the Open Mainframe project? Because there's a lot of things happening in the broader community. IBM has an entire academic initiative program. Broadcom is doing an apprenticeship program. I'm doing a Women of COBOL video series on Tech Channel. As a volunteer. It's not a Micro Focus thing, it's a Tech Channel thing that I'm doing as a volunteer, where I interview women across the industry. Recently interviewed Dr. Maggie Hall, who's built an academic and building a program to teach people COBOL who are currently unhoused, and help people go from homeless to COBOL programmers and highly successful. So there's a ton of stuff going on in this space. Within the Open Mainframe project, we have the COBOL programming course, which is a very mature project. They have an entire curriculum and hands-on labs, and it's open source curriculum, and it's continuing to be developed and promoted to students. You have the COBOL Working Group, which focuses on the misinformation, and we have a number of activities going on in there. And my new working group is focused on modernization, but modernization of COBOL and development of COBOL is within scope for that as well.
You talk about diversity and inclusion as well there. Mm-hmm. So can you also talk about, especially in the mainframe, because the community has been around for a while. Sometimes the folks that, when they were at the peak of their career, the cultural nuances were different than what they are today. We are becoming more and more sensitive. We are becoming more and more aware. We are creating more inclusive workplace. So have you seen how has the mainframe community reacted to this change?
Well, the mainframe community is really a tight-knit community. That's one of the things that I really love about being a mainframer is it's a very supportive environment, but it's also a reflection of the society that they're living in. I think it's in the space of COBOL, since we started this conversation about COBOL, it's very interesting to note that those earliest COBOL programmers were, for large part, women, because it was considered secretarial work. It was considered a menial task. As soon as programming became prestigious and considered to be an intellectual activity, that's when the people of the 60s who felt that women weren't capable of those sorts of things started to push them out of the jobs and replace them with men. So most people today think that a male-dominated industry has always been male-dominated. It's not. It only became male-dominated when it became important.
It's very interesting to note also that the people who were actually responsible for COBOL in the first place, the people whose idea COBOL was, and it was a committee of people, and there were several people involved, but the most notable personalities that formed what became COBOL were themselves female. Mm-hmm. So this is not only was it an open project, it was a committee project. It wasn't owned by a vendor or an institution. It was all the right minds around the table coming up with a good idea. But it was dominated by formidable, smart women. So actually, ultimately we should be looking back to the distant past to remind ourselves of some of those diversity questions that were tackled then and could be tackled again.
Let's go back to the working group, the new Modernization Working Group. Talk a bit about the group. What is the goal, and what is your kind of mission with the project?
Okay, it's a big mission. One of the things that I've noticed in my time in modernization space is the fact that pretty much everybody has a different definition of that word, and it's causing a lot of confusion. You talk to one person and modernization means using modern technology, moving off the mainframe, getting rid of COBOL, and that is modernization. You talk to somebody else and modernization is about taking what you have and giving it new things like APIs or DevOps. The truth is that modernization is better defined in terms of the outcomes and not what you're doing. And so the modernization, the way I think of it is whatever it takes, I need a better definition, but basic words are whatever it takes to meet the modern needs of your business. So that's where the modern is about current modern needs and the outcomes, as opposed to the types of activities you're taking. And someone mentioned to me, somebody should do something to make it easier for us to talk to customers without confusing them. Every time you go in and talk to customers, you're having to set the definition, you're having to set the scope of what you're talking about. So we, as an industry, can engage with customers much more effectively if we can create a common umbrella under which we can all operate, a common set of definitions. And so the concept is define the word modernization. Underneath that, create a framework of application modernization, infrastructure modernization, process modernization, broad categories. Under each of those categories, fill out the variety of things that you can do to modernize your infrastructure, to modernize your process. And underneath that layer, have the community contribute thought leadership, white papers, educational videos, so that we have a central organized repository that's agreed to across the industry of how we're going to organize this, how we're going to run this, and presents to the customer valuable information to help them move forward of what they need to do. The complex part is where we don't agree, right? So how am I going to balance that when one company says this is the way to go 90% of the time, and another company says, no, that's really not a great idea. You need to go this way 90% of the time. What I think we'll end up doing is presenting both sides of that argument and letting the customer decide. So my main role in this working group is not to be setting that definition, not defining the framework, but to moderate between these wide range of voices and give us all a platform to talk about the things that we all need to talk about, but with a common set of language so that we can bring the customers along with us.
With Open Mainframe, these working groups, they also work closely with each other.
Yes.
And when we are talking about the COBOL problem, so if I just, look at COBOL, so from modernization perspective, how do you look at COBOL, and what does modernization mean for COBOL?
So, certainly I have my perspective. The goal of the working group is to get the group together, define those list of challenges that are COBOL related and those types of things that we'd like to educate the community about. I think what's really important is the partnerships that need to happen. So the COBOL Working Group would certainly be a partner with us, and that their mission is to dispel these myths. So they would be identifying those topics that really would need to be in this repository and this framework. And we would be moderating what content goes into there to make sure that it's vendor neutral, that it's not disparaging of other points of view, but presenting your perspective and whatever guidelines and rules the community decides, and partner with COBOL Working Group, partner with the Cloud Native Cloud Foundry, CNCF, part of the Linux Foundation, partner with the Secure Software Development. I was just talking with them today, and try to integrate some of these concepts, and we all, security and all of it, there's activities that you need to do to keep moving forward. And building that central repository that will start small, build out over time, of thought leadership indexed in a way that customers can find the information that they need.
Excellent. If I ask, how do you see this working group can solve some of the challenges that you were talking about? How will you collaborate with them?
Well, first of all, it's been a long time coming that someone attempts to centralize a definition of the term modernization so that everyone can point at it and agree, and it's a huge, broad topic, agree a single place to go, because the industry is looking for a single source of truth, which echoes what we've been doing in the COBOL Working Group, which is let's just understand objectively where COBOL stands. So some of the work I think that we've been doing and continue to do in the COBOL Working Group, which is to effectively measure as best we can attitudes towards COBOL, usage of COBOL, and future strategies and plans for COBOL. This will all be useful data that can then inform the modernization group as we say, well, here are some actual facts from the market that we use to effectively measure and test the definitions that the modernization working group may have and may come up with, and we say, well, this is what the market's telling us, so please take this as a source of information for building that framework. And of course, the COBOL working group can then also absorb and learn from any of those definitions and factor into our conversations and our research the kinds of things that might also be possible we haven't yet considered as it pertains to the COBOL language. So I see the groups, and it will inevitably happen because Misty and I will broker it to make sure it does, and there are several people on both sides of the conversation to steward this correctly. We'll make sure that there's regular interlock and feeding of information. Of course, that's all enabled by the fact that it's an open mainframe project group. So you leave your job title at the door, you just turn up as an eager helper, and we come up with a meritocratic process for finding out what we need to do. So I'm looking forward to it. I think tomorrow is COBOL announces the recent work that we've been doing, but you can be sure we'll be in lockstep from that point onwards.
Let's talk about the research paper, the COBOL research paper, some of the,
Okay, so last year we set about measuring how much COBOL there was, and we got some illuminating results, and there's more than there ever was before by some distance. So that's great, and we sort of celebrated that, and we said, look, COBOL's thriving. And then we thought, well, I wonder why it's thriving. And we thought, we should probably find out why is it thriving. And so the next batch of research sets out to answer some of the bigger questions about what is it people are doing today, and more importantly tomorrow, that causes them to turn once again to COBOL to say, how is it going to solve our business problems of the future? And of course, we can speculate, and I do often, well, it's probably because of this, it's probably because of that. What we want is the market to tell us. And another thing we've recently done is try and understand why there's so much confusion and misunderstanding about COBOL. We, again, have speculated, well, maybe it's because there's unconscious bias against certain technology, there's the age of the personnel that might be making decisions on IT strategy has changed, and the people who might have been fans of COBOL are no longer in the decision-making positions. There's lots of reasons we think, but we didn't know. So we're trying to understand some of the misconceptions about COBOL. What do we think are the biggest barriers to truly understanding COBOL's value? And so that work is already underway, and Dr. Maggie Hall, who Misty mentioned earlier, she's sort of led the charge on that research. So there's a few elements that we're doing, and we'll put out a short blog tomorrow that explains where you can get access to the prospectus and how you can get involved, because we're looking for help. We can't do it alone. There's only a few of us. We want everyone in the community to be involved with this, as always. It's an open mainframe community. For it to be successful, the whole community needs to be involved. It takes a village, so let's get the whole village lined up.
Misty, Derek, thank you so much for taking time out today. Sit down. There are a lot of topics that we are more complicated, more complex, which will take longer time. But it's good that you touched upon some of those, and I would love to have you back on the show to discuss some of those. And Derek, of course, I'd love to see you again to discuss the work that is going on with the COBOL Working Group. But I really appreciate you spending time today and talk about the work that is going on there, and of course the updates that are there with the Modernization group. There's so much to be done through this group, because I think that's the pain point of the open mainframe or mainframe at this point. So thanks for sharing all those insights, and look forward to the next discussion. Thank you.
Thanks very much.